Emily, all he's going to be doing is trying to prove to the jury, I'm not a bad person. There's a reason in the law we exclude character evidence as a rule, because you're not trying somebody on whether they're a good person or a bad person. O.J. Simpson seemed like a perfectly nice person when he sat there to be tried for nearly beheading his ex-wife and Ron Goldman. The trial wasn't actually about that. It was about whether there was proof beyond a reasonable doubt about whether he committed this crime. Your character doesn't say whether you did it or didn't. Here in New York, we're going to allow a trial on Donald Trump's character. And he's been in business so long and has been such a colorful character for long enough that he really can't effectively allow that to happen, which means he can't take the stand. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. It just also seems like such a great use of everyone's time just going through the annals of Donald Trump's various expressions of his own personal character. I think that will serve the public very well at this point. He has been so shy to reveal his true self up until now, but maybe finally they will get to the bottom of it here. I'm also wondering how real this toothache is, because I would honestly, if I were sitting and listening to this, probably spontaneously have a toothache as well. But, Megyn, I agree with exactly what you're saying here. And I think also it's important to remember that this is clearly a tactic. Liz Cheney has an op-ed in the New York Times opinion page today talking about how important this trial is. And you're starting to see, I think it was Pramila Jayapal said on a Sunday show just yesterday, something to the extent as, we wouldn't have even been here if Donald Trump had just been impeached. So what's also on trial, I think, are the tactics of the left here. And the more that we're sort of putting Donald Trump's character on trial after, everybody has had years and years and years to listen to a trial of Donald Trump's character, the left is going to lose in that sort of court of public opinion ruling.
This just in, Pecker's up. Sorry, had to do it.
That was like a New York Post headline.
Had to do it. Is it New York Post? I missed that this morning. I got it from Steve Krakauer.
No, I'm saying you should write the New York Post headline.
Oh, yeah, no, Steve Krakauer should do it. Pecker's up. He's on the stand. David Pecker, I think now former head of AEI, or not AEI, AMI, American Media, which they're laughing at AEI. It's very, very different. They finished the opening statement after Trump got all those negative rulings on what can come in if he takes a stand. They did opening statements, and now the first witness for the prosecution is David Pecker. There's a lot to go over here. Before we get to Pecker, because I know you ladies love Pecker. What? I can't stop myself. Let me give you an outline of what.
You or Steve?
That one was me. Okay. The prosecutor, I'm going to give you guys and the audience just an overview of what's being said in opening statements. Just keep in mind as you listen to this, there's a reason they call them opening statements, and then they call what happens at the end closing arguments. You're allowed to argue the evidence in your closing. The opening statements are supposed to be just statements of what you will be proving in front of them without tying, fantastic conclusions together and stitching a narrative and so on. The opening statements are supposed to be factual and not argument. So this is what the prosecution says they are going to be able to prove. Prosecutor Matthew Colangelo. He begins by telling the jury that Trump, and just for the listening audience, there's no audio, there's no video. So this is the only way we can get through this trial. We get updates from the court, and then we have to read them to you. That's why I did a dramatic reenactment of the press coverage the other day. Begins by telling the jury Trump lied over and over and over again by disguising his business records. Trump, Michael Cohen, and David Pecker formed a conspiracy at a meeting early in the campaign to help Trump get elected. Colangelo has referred multiple times to this conspiracy between these three men. For the record, Trump is not charged with conspiracy. It's just a colorful term to describe. They met and reached an agreement about what the National Enquirer and other magazines within the AMI empire would do when it came to Trump. The New York Times reports, let's see. They're talking about how the National Enquirer did indeed go on to try to help Trump's campaign in 2016, including by embarrassing some of his opponents like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They put up a couple of the headlines. Reports the New York Times, Jonah Bromwich, I see one juror smiling slightly, as Colangelo describes some of those headlines. Remember, they accused Ted Cruz of his father of participating in the Kennedy assassination. It was a long list. Okay, they say, the prosecution, Pecker will testify that $150,000 was more than the National Enquirer would typically pay for such a deal, and that Pecker had trouble being reimbursed for the money. Crucially, Colangelo says Pecker will testify that he spoke to Trump about it. Forgive me for not understanding the math on the 150. Stormy, I think, was paid 130. I think they paid 30 to a doorman at Trump Tower. And then there was another, it might have been 150 to Karen McDougal, who was the Playboy playmate. So, what's that, 330 or so all in? Now, critically, they say that David Pecker is going to testify he spoke to Trump about this. So he's going to put it first person. I can tell you Trump was in on it because this is all the alleged election interference that they claim Trump was up to. Give me a couple of give me one more minute to lay this out. He says he has an audio recording, the prosecution does, regarding Cohen, Michael Cohen, that Cohen made between himself and Mr. Trump discussing the Karen McDougal deal. She was the Playboy Playmate of the Year in 98, with whom Trump allegedly had an extramarital affair. The National Enquirer paid her off to write, quote, health columns for the National Enquirer. She never wrote any. This was really a payment, they say, to keep her quiet instead of going public with the affair. Ultimately, the National Enquirer assigned a reporter to write the articles and put her name on them. Okay. Jurors will hear Trump, the prosecution promises, in his own voice, urging that this money, the $150,000, be repaid in cash. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Be repaid in cash to whom? The National Enquirer is paying her the $150,000. And I know that the Michael Cohen payment to Stormy was out of a Michael Cohen payment, and then he got repaid, he says, by Trump. This does not connect Trump to the actual crime, which only relates to a payment to Stormy Daniels. Okay, sorry, it's getting confusing. But anyway, they're saying that this pattern of paying off Karen McDougal suggests a pattern of behavior that prosecutors will urge the jurors to take into account, make assumptions about Trump's involvement in the payment to Daniels based on what he did with McDougal. The prosecutor described a communication from Keith Davidson, the lawyer for Karen McDougal, to Dylan Howard. This is the guy actually running the National Enquirer under David Pecker, the owner, as it became clear that Trump was winning the election. This is where Karen McDougal's lawyer says to Dylan Howard, as it became clear Trump was winning, "What have we done?" And then Colangelo says it was election fraud, pure and simple. This is their theory, that covering up an affair, like you have some obligation to let your affair partners come out and humiliate you. Otherwise, it's election interference. Okay, so Eliana, if you ever run for office and something bad in your past comes back to haunt you, and somebody says, I'm gonna tell everybody about how you cheated on some math tests, which we know Eliana Johnson never did. You can't do anything to make them go away. Otherwise, it's election interference. You have to sit there and let yourself be embarrassed, whether it's true or not. Otherwise, you could wind up in New York State Supreme. So I'll stop there for now. What do you make of this theory of the case and how it's going so far?
I'll stipulate that I am not a lawyer. However, I am familiar and I've talked to folks who are familiar with the defense, the Trump side's legal strategy here. It's pretty clear to me that the prosecution's goal is to throw the kitchen sink at Trump and make the case that he's a bad, skeezy person. Look, we know all of this stuff. And I think the defense is going to try to focus very narrowly on the crime for which Trump is being prosecuted. And they're going to argue it is not actually illegal to have an affair with someone and then sign an NDA. That is not illegal. People sign NDAs in the course of business all the time. And the challenge, I think, for the prosecution is going to be to prove that Trump personally ordered whoever the person was in the Trump organization, some junior person, and I believe that guy is going to testify to falsify those business records, that he had control over how the record of this transaction was entered when he got a bill from Michael Cohen, and that therefore Trump personally was responsible for the falsification of that record. So it's a lot more complicated, I think, than the prosecution is presenting it, which is Trump's a bad skeezy guy and does bad skeezy things, and all that stuff is illegal. But they're clearly trying to paint a larger picture and obscure what I think is like a pretty minor, flimsy, and weak case. And there's a reason that Alvin Bragg's predecessor did not bring this case.
As we approach another critical election, many Americans are concerned. Recent studies reveal that an astonishing 56% of citizens report feelings of anxiety or dread about the upcoming election. But I want to tell you about AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC is more than a senior organization. During these challenging times, they fight for common sense and for the U.S. to return to traditional American values. Visit amac.us/Megyn today to get an exclusive election year special, a 4-year AMAC membership for just $30. As an AMAC member, you not only enjoy money-saving benefits, but also the AMAC magazine, free Social Security and Medicare advice, a trusted voice in Washington, and a community of like-minded patriots. Take advantage of this election year special, 4 years for just $30, and be part of the solution. Join now at amac.us/Megyn. That's amac.us/Megyn. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.